Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we're going to head over to Edinburgh once again, and this brewery, for those of you watching in the likes of Canada, America, Australia, Japan and even all over the place I would guess, this is probably actually one of the most well-known Scottish breweries these days. So we're going to go to Innis Gunn and have a taste of their lager beer. But what's interesting for me about this beer is that when I left about 8 or 9 months ago to go on my travels to Australia and things like that, this beer was only just being released, but now I've come back and it's available quite widely in different pubs on tap, so it seems to have become very, very popular in the 8 or 9 months that I was away travelling, so it's quite funny just to come back to that. But as is usual with my beer reviews then, I'll take you through a very brief history of the brewery. It will only be 2 or 3 minutes long, but if you do want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. The brewery website's in the video description for you below to have a look at, and there's also a link down there for my other reviews from Innis Gunn, and I will be adding to that in the near future, no doubt, because Innis Gunn seem to be producing a hell of a lot of different beers these days, which is really cool. There's always new stuff to review from them. But anyway, to tell you a little bit about Innis Gunn. Innis Gunn are an independently owned specialist brewing company based in Edinburgh, and they were established back in 2003. Originally, Innis Gunn was actually a joint venture with William Grant's whisky distillery, but it became family owned after Dougal Sharp bought out the Grant's shares in 2008. But Dougal had actually previously been the head brewer at the Caledonian Brewery in Edinburgh, quite a famous establishment in fact, but he was first exposed to brewing at his father's brewery quite a few years ago. But the thing that's quite funny about Innis Gunn is that the Oak Aged original beer, which many of you will be able to find in your various countries as you watch this video, the Oak Aged original beer was actually discovered by accident. Dougal Sharp was actually contacted by Grant's distillery, who wanted to infuse their whisky casks with a kind of quite malty and quite interesting beer. So Dougal went up and made a specialist recipe that was very malt forward, and then this beer was put into the casks for 30 days and then replaced by whisky, which in itself gained a really good reputation. But the distillers were very, very interested in what this beer would taste like, so they tasted it, thought it was really good, and then phoned up Dougal and he tried it and thought it was really incredible as well. It had this really interesting and infused taste, and if you've tried the beer you will know what I'm talking about, and of course that is the trademark for Innis Gunn these days. But that was the birth of the Oak Aged original beer, which is still a member of their core range. So the moral of the story here is that this thing was discovered by accident and it's now become very popular. So it's actually quite funny that one of the most prominent Scottish breweries, if you like, discovered their whole trademark of barrel aging completely by accident. So really quite a cool story actually. But these guys have a number of beers these days. In their core range they've got 3 main ones, which is the Toasted Oak IPA, the Rum Finish, which is actually very nice, and I've still to review that one for you, and they also have the Oak Aged original one. But they've got various seasonal beers. The lager one is also a regular these days too, but they've got various seasonals like Irish Whiskey Cask and a few other ones, bourbon stout and all of this sort of thing. The stout beers are actually particularly nice in my experience, so do check them out. Have a look at the brewery website and see all the different beers you can get. But the Innis Gunn really do have this really nice kind of infused trademark taste, so do give them a shout if you're interested in barrel aging, and they do tell you a little bit about it on the website too, so check it out. But anyway, let's get on to the tasting of this beer itself. So this one is a 4.6% lager beer. I'll just bring up the camera and let you actually have a quick look at the artwork here. This is different from the other Innis Gunn ones. And on the taps, when you see this beer produced, it does have this kind of similar logo, but it's different from the other ones. The other ones, of course, have the shiny label, but you can see on the top label there, that's the typical Innis Gunn. So the 3 barrels, that's their typical symbol. But this one, interestingly, actually just has a blank bottle cap. It tells you a little bit on the back. It says, "Our lager takes its inspiration from the German beer style Helles, meaning light coloured. Like the first Helles beer brewed in Munich back in 1894, ours has a pronounced malty flavour balanced by light aromatic hoppiness, which makes it very refreshing indeed. Unusually, as well as our unique Scottish malts, we have added some naked golden oats to the brew, which impart a satisfying smoothness to the finish." So yeah, it's quite an interesting one. I've tried this before on tap, and I do have to say it is actually a really quite nice beer, but it's 4.6% ABV by volume. And one of the things that's interesting about this label too is that you'll see on the bottom, normally the Innis Gunn beers tell you right here how many days it's been barrel aged for, but this one doesn't tell you. But you can see Dougal Sharp's signature there along with Kirsty Russell, and some of the older bottles that I have somebody else. I forget the guy's name, I think it's somebody Hislop, but I might be wrong about that. but they do have different names there. So it was approved by bottling, and then Dougal Sharp is the master brewer. And these beers are actually brewed at the Wellpark Brewery, which is the tenants brewery in Glasgow. You can see on the bottle there too that it has a nice sort of inlay of the glass, so you can see it says Innis Gunn Edinburgh, and it has the Innis Gunn barrel on there, but it is brewed, from what I believe, at the Wellpark Brewery in Glasgow. So yeah, but they're based in Randolph Crescent in Edinburgh. But without further ado, let's get on and try this beer. I've tried this one quite a few times, but I'm interested to see how the bottle version differs. So as you can see, a nice lightly smoky opening there, and we'll just get this guy out and into the glass. You can really smell that kind of typical Innis Gunn infused taste on this beer. But as you can see, the head on that is actually going to disappear fairly quickly. But it's poured, you've got a nice kind of half or a quarter or even a third of a finger of a frothy white head there that is just going to disappear very, very quickly. But it looks very nice. It's actually quite clear. If I put my fingers behind it, you can see that it is somewhat transparent. There's some big bubbles just sticking towards the side of the glass there, which look really nice, and a lot of little bubbles just going up towards the bottom of the head. But I think the best way to describe that is a sort of pale golden straw colour. Maybe a light golden amber is another good way too, but it looks very, very nice, and you can see the head is just fading to be a very thin foamy layer. But in terms of the aroma, you can actually smell the kind of typical lagerish malts there. There's a little bit of corny sweetness to that, which I don't remember from the tap versions, but it actually smells very, very nice. But what's cool about Innis Gunn as well is they used to do their beers all in a sort of clear glass colour, so you had to really store them in darkness, but now they're adopting the more craft accepted trade of putting them in brown bottles. But in terms of the aroma of this beer, you've got the typical Innis Gunn elements. There's a lot of kind of vanilla and woody, oaky flavours coming out of the aroma here. So that's the typical Innis Gunn sort of malt base on this one. But there's a little bit of caramel sweetness, a little bit of kind of corniness, which probably comes from the sort of oats that they've added to this beer. You can see the head is actually just coming up a little bit better again as I sugar it up, so maybe that's a tip for you with this beer. But you've got a nice little bit of caramel sweetness, some bready malts, and perhaps even some biscuit in there too. But you can really pick up the kind of pale malts in there too. But they talk about the Helles style of beer. One thing I'll point out about the Helles style of beer in Germany, because when I used to live there, you always got two different types of Helles. You had the more hoppy Helles, which was a Dortmunder Helles, and that always tended to be a kind of grassy and sort of aromatic-y, hop-forward one. But then you also had the Munich Helles, which tended to be a bit more malt-forward, a bit more caramelly, biscuity, and slightly bready too. And from what I remember of this beer, it fits more into the sort of Munich Helles category. But I'm surprised that they're saying that the first Helles beer was only 1894. I was sure the Helles beer went back a lot further than that. But perhaps there's a lot of crossover between the Pils and Helles beer. The Helles beer, I think, was born from the original Pils beer or Pilsen beer. But there's a lot of interesting history in German beer. But anyway, this beer, the main point is that this beer is more of a Munich Helles beer because of its bready and more malty character. But as I say, it's got quite a big woody and vanilla nose on this one. Typical of Innis Gunn, of course, but you've got a good bit of kind of caramel sweetness, some biscuity and more bready malt in there too. You can pick up the typical lager pale malt, which is obviously a little bit lighter, but you can just get a little bit of that grassy hop and some floral and slightly citrusy character too. But it smells very, very nice, and it's interesting to have that typical lager aroma infused a little bit with the Innis Gunn characteristics. But without further ado, let's get into this guy and have a little bit of a taste. So without further ado, this is the lager beer from Innis Gunn, based in Edinburgh in Scotland. Slàinte. Yeah, quite interesting. As I say, it has a typical lager flavour, but then underneath it, once you get further into it, you get a lot of the kind of nice Innis Gunn flavours. You should wash it around your mouth just a little bit before you let your mouth adjust to it and get used to the flavours. But yeah, first impressions of it is that it's a very, very light beer, which obviously is what you would expect from a beer that fits into the lager category. To me, it's got quite a different mouthfeel from the Helles beer. It's actually a good bit lighter than even a Munich Helles. The German beers always have a good kind of thicker mouthfeel to them than this. So in terms of a Munich Helles, it is actually very, very light, but if you drink it on tap, from what I remember, it is actually a good bit heavier than this. It's perhaps just the bottle conditioning that's made it that little bit lighter. But you've got a nice, interesting malt base on this. You're getting a lot of the kind of pale lager malts, and that just blankets the middle of the tongue there. There is a little bit of a kind of thicker bready element to it as well. I want to say there's just a teeny little bit of earthy character in the hops coming out too, and you're getting the sort of slightly grassy, floral and aromatic-y flavours just move right around the edge of the tongue, but right at the back of the tongue you've got the sort of earthy characteristics coming out. As you move slightly further forward, you're getting the aromatic kind of dryness, and right on the very front of the tongue is where you're getting a bit of the grassiness and citrus flavours coming out. You get this little oily bubble that moves towards the front of the tongue there as the flavour progresses in this beer, and that's just a nice, slightly juicy citrus character coming out of this one. But of course, the main thing with Innis Gunn is the malt base. So you've got a nice light pale malt base in this one, just a little bit of bready characteristic, and that just blankets the middle of the tongue there, but there's some nice woody and vanilla flavours in there too, and you've got a nice kind of infused caramel taste too. But as you would always expect with Innis Gunn, it is quite an interesting and quite infused taste. There maybe is even just a little bit of a sweeter yeasty character in there, but I want to say it's a pale malt flavour, some nice bready characteristics, and just that kind of typical vanilla, oaky and caramel infused taste there. Not quite as prominent as some of the other beers that you'll get from these guys, such as the Oak Aged Original and perhaps the rum finish as well. The rum finish is a little bit more spicy from what I remember, but it's quite interesting. It's a more sort of sessionable, drinkable version of the sort of Oak Aged Original, if you like. It has a lot of the characteristics of that, but it's just that little bit lighter, I would think. But it's become, as I said, it's become very, very popular in Scotland. It's quite a common beer to find in your local pubs. But in terms of the mouthfeel of this one, I'd say it's quite light-bodied. It's a good bit lighter than the other ones you'll get from Innis Gunn. The carbonation on it is quite smooth, but at the same time it's a little bit sharper than some of the other Innis Gunns, and that helps just bring out the more hoppy characteristic of this beer, the sort of grassy, floral, slightly citrusy hops. It does help bring out that around the edge of the tongue just a little bit more. Innis Gunn is a typically malt flavoured beer, but this one is just that little bit more hoppy, and it's actually a good bit drier around the edge of the tongue than I remember some of the other ones being. But you do have a nice little bit of malty sweetness in there too, but this is a more hop forward one than the other ones you'll try from Innis Gunn. So it's quite an interesting beer. It's quite different from their other stuff, and it is, in my opinion, a sort of a slightly watered down version a little bit, if you like, of the Oak Aged Original, but it's designed for that, and it's designed to be quite sessionable. So this beer could easily be a kind of summer session beer. And it does have that interesting typical Innis Gunn tint to it, so it's basically a lager beer that has an Innis Gunn tint to it. This is probably a good way to describe it. So overall, I would give it a try if you enjoy your kind of typical lager beers, because it does have just an interesting quirk to it, which is of course the barrel aging component. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this beer review. Please let me know in the comments section your own thoughts on this one below. As I say, it's a little bit lighter than some of the Innis Gunn ones you'll get otherwise, but it's definitely interesting and worth the try. Let me know your own thoughts on it, but for the meantime, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. I've got a few other Innis Gunn beers for you coming up soon, including the Canadian Cherrywood. Actually, I think that's my last one for a little while I'll review for you, but I will catch you soon with that. So slàinte for now. Cheers.